Hello everyone, this is Press Any Button and we are back for one final time with our Invaders series. And in this part we're going to be focusing on how we can end our game and how we can actually build our game. Now the first part, ending our game, is going to revolve around creating a game over screen and a retry button. And the last part is just going to revolve around using the build settings to actually build our game and export it into a format where we can just play it as an isolated package without having access to things that are working behind the scenes. So the first thing that we're going to do to finalize this game is to make sure that we have all the components that we want in the scene and we have everything looking as we want it to. And something that catches my attention when I think about this is the camera. Now for a long time we've actually been using the default color for our camera, but we do have the opportunity to actually change that. So if we go over to where it says background on the inspector when we have our main camera selected, we can click on this box and we can change that color to black. Now that saves us time having to add a plane behind this space, and it saves us sort of resources because we don't have another object in the game. Now the next thing that we need to do is go over to our prefabs folder and look at some of the barriers that we've actually created. Now we have a built version of our barriers, so I can just drag those straight into the game and position them as I want them to. Of course I have to put them in the hierarchy. And then let's position our second barrier and our third barrier, have that as -2 right there, and maybe bump them up just a little bit to make sure that they don't collide with anything we don't want them to collide with, so by about 0.5, maybe 0.25. Now that we've got those things sorted, we next want to go to our scenes folder and we want to create a new scene for that game over screen. So if we right click here, we can go to create and then scene, and let's call this game over. Now let's save what we've done in this scene by going to File, Save Scene, and then let's open up this new game over scene. Now again, we can change the color on the main camera, so we can change that to black, but that's not really going to matter right now because we're actually going to be using another canvas. So if we change this back to blue just to make it easier on ourselves to be able to see where everything is, there we go. We can go to the hierarchy, right click, go to UI, canvas, and open up a new canvas, add component, put can in there, canvas group, then add another component, UI, text. And what do we want this text to say? Well, we want this text to say game over, because that's what we're aiming to actually show them. So now that we've got our game over text, what can we actually do with it? Well, we can mess around with the style of our text. So right here I've only got one font, but of course you can change that in your own time. And then we can change the color of our font, and I think a nice white would be appropriate. We can change the size of our font, of course, by doing that, and we can center our font and make sure that it's positioned using some of our anchor presets in the right places. And that seems pretty good to me. Now the next thing that we want to add is another UI component. So what we want to do is right click on canvas, go to UI, and then image. And then we want this text to lie on top of this image, and we want the text to be visible. So let's just tone down that color a bit, so change that to black. So the way that these layers work for our UI components is a bit like Photoshop. When we rearrange them under the canvas heading or parent, we rearrange where they are positioned for our game view. The next thing that we want to do with this image is go over to these anchor presets, hit Alt when in those anchor presets, and then we can have that UI component stretch over all of the screen so we don't have any spaces and we don't have to do that ourselves. Okay, so we've got our text and we've got our image. That seems pretty good. We could add a button now, but it also kind of seems a little boring what we're doing with this. So I thought it'd be a little bit fun to show you how you can animate text just in the same way that we animated our aliens. So if we go to this canvas over here, and whilst we've got the canvas selected, go to create in our animations tab. And if you don't have that animations tab open anymore, all you need to do is go to window and then animation, or hit Control and 6 as it says here, and you'll have that little animation window and you'll be able to move it around as you please, but I'm going to keep mine at the bottom here. So we've got our canvas game object selected, and all we need to do is hit create, and it's going to ask us to actually name our new animation. I'm going to call this game over, and then save that. Okay, so we've got everything saved, and we run into this same dilemma that we actually ran into when we were creating our aliens, which is we don't have any nodes or anything to work with, and we're sort of stuck at this point if we don't know what we're doing. But we do know what we're doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to add property, and then where it says text, if we hit this little icon here, we're presented with a drop down of all of the features that we can animate of the text. So we've got rect transform right here, and we've got text script. So we've got color, we've got material, we've got all of these other options. Now the things that we're going to select are, first we're going to select the anchor position. So we can do that by just hitting this plus icon right next to where it says anchored position, and then we'll get some nodes for that. And just like with our alien animations, using these keyframes and these nodes right here, we can actually affect how our game component animates. And if we go to 30 frames, then the animation between this node and this node is going to take half a second. So we want a few more nodes just to fill up our animation. So if we go over to 60 here, we can assure that we have 1.5 seconds of animation. And I think I'm just going to round it up to 2 seconds of animation, and this is going to be a really simple one. Okay, so what can we actually do with this animation? So let's click on where it says anchored position. So not the top overall keyframe, but this one at the bottom. So we see that our position is exactly where we had it, where we set it to start off with when we actually added our text. And we see that this is common for all of our keyframes. Now what I want to do is have it so that every other frame the text is offset by a certain value. So right here I think I'm going to have it offset by about 0.5 and see how that looks. Okay, that's a little too small. And I did forget that the values when we're working with this rect transform will be small, so we'll have to compensate for that. So instead of having it at 1 or 2 flat, we're going to have it at 10 or 20. Okay, so then we're going to want our animation to go back to the original, so that's fine. And then have it on -10 over here. And then back to the original. And now if we preview our animation, we can see how it looks. So it's moving up and down. It's moving up and down. And that seems pretty okay to me. But we can still go on to add a couple more other properties that will actually make our game over screen a little bit more interesting. So if we go to add property right here, and then go to text again, text script, and then go over to color and hit that plus sign there, then we have all of these nodes for our color. So what could we do with our color? Well, we can actually make it fade. So you see how our color is currently white. If we copy this node, take it to about 30, and then take a look at the color of our component, we see that it's still white. So what we can actually do is change this to black, or we can just remove the alpha here, and we'll be able to actually see that the color dims. Now if we add a few more nodes, we can have it so that the color fades to black and then it goes back all the way to white again. So we'll just need to change the color back up to white and really fill out that alpha, and I'll just finish that right now. So with your last node, you should be taking the alpha down like this and then just hitting this X, finalize that action, and let's take a look at how that is actually shown. And that's just a start. You can do so many different things if you want to give that a try, but that was just a bit of a taster of what we can actually do with our game over screen, and that looks pretty good to me. So right now let's save this scene to make sure that we've finalized everything that we've done here, and let's continue on to make that UI button component. But before we go on and do that, let's just double back to our other scene, which is our main level, and let's look at how we can connect our main level with our game over. So if we go over to this main level right here, you can see that I've just changed a couple of things. I've just deactivated some of these barriers to make it more of a challenge. And at this point, all of the components that I want in this scene are in the scene. I don't want to add a UI button to connect the two scenes because that seems like it would be a little too cumbersome for this particular scene. I just want it to be nice and clean. I just want it to include the game components and the gameplay. So how are we going to accomplish this? Well, we just need to manipulate one of our scripts that we already have acting in this scene, and that is the ally destroy script. So if we go over to our scripts right here and then go over to ally destroy, we can see that I've made a couple of changes to it. I'm going to open it up in MonoDevelop so we can go over these changes in more detail. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so here we have our ally destroy script. Now one thing that you'll notice immediately is that not much has been done to this script, and that's a good thing because we don't want to make massive changes that are going to affect our game in massive ways. The only things that have been changed are some of the lines of code that have been included in this script. So at the top here we have using Unity engine.scene management, and this gives us the opportunity to actually access our different scenes using script. Now the way that we catalog our scenes is done in the build settings, which we're going to do right after this, but this gives us access to those build settings. The next thing that we have down here is right under where we have destroy other.gameObject, we have scene manager.load scene. Now that's kind of self-explanatory. So we're going to access the scene manager and we're going to load a particular scene. And because my scene is called game over, exactly like this, we're going to be able to access that scene. Now there are a couple of things that we need to do to make sure that these parts of code are properly incorporated. So right here you see that I've got these little squigglies over here. Now these encapsulate the top and bottom of destroy other.gameObject and scene manager.load scene. We exclude the if statement with these brackets, and just to make that a little more clear, I'll do that. And as you can see, these two brackets are connected. I think I'm going to have it just like that because it's a bit cleaner. So you can see that these two brackets are connected like that. And that's pretty much the only thing we need to do. Add in these two lines of script and add in these squigglies. Once we've done that, we can save our script and return to Unity. So now that we have our script in our scene, all we have to do is hit the play button and see if it works. Okay, so I haven't assigned a shooting script to all of my game components, but as you saw there, when I moved in line with the bullet and was actually destroyed by it, I got a game over. So let's take a look at that again. I'll just cut to that. And there you have it. I was taken to the game over screen after my tank was destroyed. Now that is really good because we've been able to connect our game over with our main level. So that's really good, and we can continue working on that game over screen. So if we go over to our scenes folder right here, which you should have, and go over to that game over scene, then we can work in that again. Now back to creating this UI button. This UI button is going to allow us to have the option to actually restart our game if we want to, so that we don't have to exit and then reload it every time we get a game over. So how are we going to do this? Well, this button is actually part of the UI. So we're going to go to the canvas component right here, and then we're going to go to UI and then button. And that's going to add a button as a child of this canvas game object. Now I really don't want that to be there, and I don't want it to interact with our animation in any way. So let's move it down on the y-axis by a little bit. Probably a little bit more, because we do have our game over text moving up and down. Now the next thing that we can do is actually change the color of our button. So just like with all our other components, if we go over to this color picker right here, and then if we change the alpha down all the way down to that, then we aren't able to actually see our button. And I'm going to have it as that because I don't want my button to be visible. I only want the text to be visible, and we're going to work on making sure that that's more visible. So how do we change the text? Well, as you can see in the hierarchy, our button has a child game object attached to it. And if we use this icon right here, we can see that that child game object is actually our text. So now we can actually interact with our text. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the font is the same as the other font that we have for game over, and I'm going to have that as a nice clean white right there. And then I'm going to up the font size only to 20, because I want to make sure that the most prominent thing is the game over animation. But if we have our button at that size, we can see that we can actually interact with that, and it's really easy to notice where it is positioned. Now we don't want our button to actually say button, so let's put restart ? And that should be good for the text aspect of our button. It's all aligned in the ways that we would want it to be aligned. And let's just go back to our button, and then where we made the alpha for the color 0, let's just make sure that the area of interactivity for the button really encapsulates where our restart is, so that our players aren't going to click on the text thinking that they're actually interacting with the button, only to find that the button itself is much smaller than the text. And we can see right here that our restart is completely within the confines of our button. So let's just move down the alpha again, right back to 0, and there we have it. We have our button. Now a button's great, a button's good, but what can we actually do to that button to make sure that we can interact with it? Well, what we need to do to make sure that we can actually interact with this button is to make a new C# script. And it's been a long time since I've made a C# script with you guys from scratch, so we're going to do that right now. I'm not going to take you through it all from scratch, but I'm just going to show you how you can create a script one more time in this series. So if you go over to your scripts folder, right click, go to create, C# script. There we have it. We have a new C# script. And what are we going to call this? We're going to call this game restart. And then once we have our title finalized, we can double click or click on open here, and we'll be taken to MonoDevelop, where I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so we are here in MonoDevelop, and I've just constructed this scene management script, and let's take a look at what it does. Well, the first thing that you'll notice at the top is that we have using Unity engine.scene management. So we're accessing those scenes again. And then the next thing that we have is a public game object, which is going to be an image. Now, if you were here from the bullet series, you'll remember that we had a main menu where we actually used UI buttons to navigate through our game. And this is pretty much the same thing. So all of the components here are going to be identical. And this public game object image is going to act as our loading screen, because a loading screen will allow our players to recognize that the game is actually indeed loading before they switch to scene, so they're not spamming the button or wondering if the game has crashed or anything like that. It just adds that level of feedback and reassurance. So we have right here public void load scene int level, and this actually allows us to select what level we want to go to according to how they're numbered in our build settings, which we're going to go to right after this. And then we have image.setActive, so we're going to set this image active once we've clicked on the button, and in the meantime our scene will actually be loading, and the scene that we're going to load will be dictated by our public void right here. And we're going to access the scene manager, and we're going to load that scene. So now that we have all of that sorted, we can hit file and save, and then return to Unity. Alright, now that we're back in Unity, we can see that our script has been added properly. Well, right here we have some commands that we can actually input. So we have onClick, and it says that the list is empty right now. So what do we want to happen? We want on click, we want a certain scene to be loaded. Well, let's just first go into our build settings before we get too ahead of ourselves and see how we can actually add these scenes to our game. So I'm going to go to File, Build Settings, and I've already done this myself, but if I delete these real quickly, I'll be able to show you how I actually added those scenes to my game. Now I can add the open scene right here, but that's going to jumble up a couple of things that I'm doing. We only have 2 scenes in our game, and I want the first scene to be the main level. I want that to be the first scene that our player comes in contact with. So if we drag that main level in, then we can see that that's our first scene, and that's numbered scene 0. Now if we drag in game over, we can see that that is numbered scene 1. So we could also have referenced our game over scene as scene 1 if we were actually creating navigation buttons to our game over screen, but we didn't need to do that, so we just referenced the actual name of the scene. But what we're actually going to need to take in mind is that this is scene 0. So this main level is scene 0. And once we've sorted out our build settings, all we need to do is close them, and I can assure you that they will be saved, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. But what are we actually going to assign this script to? Well, we're going to need to assign this script to our canvas. So let's go to our canvas game object, and let's go to this inspector right here, and then go to add component, go to scripts, and then let's find that game restart script and add that. Now we can see that our game restart script has been added, and we have an empty slot for our game object, which is our image right here. So let's quickly make that image. With the canvas still selected, we can make another child object. So we go to UI, then image, and then just the same as we did before, we go over to these anchor presets and stretch it out by holding Alt and then using that to stretch it all out. And then while I have the image selected, I'm just going to go to UI, then text, and attach this as a child of this game object. I'm going to center that text right there. I'm going to call it loading ... Scale it up in terms of font size. Change the font again. And maybe we'll keep it as sort of black on white instead of white on black, as we've normally done, just to reverse things up in a little bit. Now you can also animate this if you want to, but your loading screen might not stay up for too long, so that's not too much of a concern, but you know how to do that at this point in the tutorial. Now that we have our image, we can go over back to this canvas, and then where we have game restart, we can drag this image right into here. And now we have our loading image selected, which is pretty good. And the next thing that we want to do with this image is to actually deselect it, because we don't need it to be active to start off with when we enter the scene. It's going to be activated when or if we hit that restart button. Now back to this button. We can see that we've got a plus icon right at the bottom of the inspector of our button where it says on click list is empty. So we're going to select that right now, and it says none. We don't have an object and we can't add a function to this button because it doesn't know what we want it to reference. So we're going to go over to this canvas, and we're going to drag our canvas into where it said none. And that means that we're going to reference our canvas when we're actually interacting with this button. So where it says no function, all we need to do is click on the function right here. We need to find the name of our script. So I have game restart. And then we need to find load scene int. And that pretty much gives us the opportunity to load the scene that is numbered thus. So our scene, our main level is scene 0. If our main level was scene 1, then we would call this 1. But for now, our main level is called scene 0. And then we can leave that as it is. Now we can hit file and save scene and see how that works out for us if we hit the play button. Okay, so here I have my restart button, and if I click it, I get the loading screen, and then I am taken right back to our main game. If an alien hits me, I'm taken over to the game over screen again, and then we just do this again and again and again as long as we want. So if I take out an alien and I get killed, well, guess what? It's going to load the scene in the way that we left it when we were messing around with it and tinkering around with it when we were making it. So now we can exit the play mode and we can finish our game. So right now we have a perfectly working Space Invaders game. We can mess around with how our enemies shoot by messing around with that enemy shot script. So if I go over to here, press F, make sure I can actually see my enemies. Okay, so this enemy has the enemy shot script. Maybe I want this enemy to have it. I'll just do this real quick. Alright, so now I can see that I have a perfectly working game with all of my aliens shooting as I want them to. I can come out of the play mode and see about working with these build settings. So what am I going to do with these build settings? First, I'm going to go to File, Build Settings, and all we need to do at this point, we have our build sort of set up. We could either select web player, but to show how you can actually select different platforms, I'm going to just select PC, Mac and Linux. So we're going to switch platform like that. It's calculating and it's switched our platform right now. And what we can actually do is we can finally build this game. We can either build it and run it, or we can build it and just keep it in our folders. I'm going to go with just build because I'll show you how we can actually run it from our folders. So if we just hit build, and making sure that all of our scenes are where we want them at, we need to make sure that this is with our assets folder. So I'm going to call this build 1. And I'm going to save this here, and it's going to save as a .exe file for Windows and different file forms for other platforms such as Mac and Linux. But right now I'm just going to save this as it is, and it is building. Now we could have actually made a separate builds folder on the level of our assets folder, but that's fine. And what we can actually do with this build 1 is we can select it. So as you can see, I have my build 1 right in front of me, and Unity's presented that in the folder that it's actually saved in right after I've built it. So I've just selected it and we're going to wait for it to load. So now that I've actually built my game and loaded it up, let's take a look at this. So do we want it windowed? We might as well have it windowed, so the resolution is going to change slightly, and then we're going to hit that play button. This is the exciting part. Let's see if our game actually works. Well, does the point system work? Yep. Do our barriers work? Yep. And most importantly, what we've actually been working with today, does our game overwork? Yes, it does. Now, let's see, can we restart our game once we're in this state? Hit that button, get the loading screen, and we can start all over again. And that is how we create a successful Invaders game. Now there are different features that we can add to our game. I did skip over the fact that, you know, when the aliens get too close, our game's also meant to end. But I'm sure you people at home can figure that out, because the main focus of these tutorials is really about seeing how things work behind the scenes in the games that we usually play. And replicating those games can help us out a lot, but we just need to focus on getting our skills a bit better with each and every project, or a lot better with each and every project, so we can make our own massive projects. That has been another press any button tutorial. That has been our Invaders series, our second complete tutorial on this channel. If you like this series, then you can leave a big old like if you want. If you have any questions or queries, then they are best left in the comments section below, where I will check on them. If you want to subscribe, then you can do so, because you'll have more content coming your way from this channel. And as always, thank you for the support, thank you for being a part of this tutorial, and I will be back in another series.